Good evening, everybody. If you'd like, you can get your Bibles out. Open them to Judges chapter 18. Judges chapter 18. So, in the days of the judges, everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. And in chapter 17, we get the beginning of a story where we get just a taste of that. We get just a hint of what it looks like when everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. And we see that here is a young man who stole from his mother a bunch of silver, and he feels bad about it, so he gives it back, and she says, "Oh, bless you for giving it back. I'm going to dedicate this to you." And so what does she do with it? She makes an idol, and gives it to the silversmith, and he makes a molten image for her. And so what Micah does is he sets up a shrine in his house for it, and he consecrates one of his sons to be priest. But then, by chance, a Levite comes from down in the south, in the southern territory of Judah, and he comes up and happens by chance to come to Micah's house. When Micah hears that he's a Levite, Micah says, "Now this is the guy that I need to serve as my priest." So he deconsecrates his son, I suppose, and consecrates this Levite, gives him an ephod, and allows him to serve as priest there. And how does he feel about himself?
Feels great.
Now I know that I'll be blessed by the Lord, because I've got a Levite serving as a priest for me here. So this is just, no condemnation is given here in the story. It's just told as the factual events of what's taking place when everybody does what's right in their own eyes. And so here's what we see take place. Well, the story's going to continue. And probably the real purpose of recording this for us, besides just giving us insight into what it was like for the Israelites during the days of the judges, is also to tell us how the Danites are going to end up moving from the territory they were given by Joshua here in this area up to this area up here. And so that's probably the greater reason why this is recorded here, is to tell us how this happened. Any thoughts, comments, questions before we get into the new material in chapter 18?
The Levite man that agreed to the getting paid and a place to live and food and being a priest. I mean, if he is from Levi, which it says that he is, he ought to have been taught by the other Levites, even his father, the law. And he would know that he wouldn't know the lineage of actually being a priest or being able to serve into the temple. So he's actually more, I guess, doing sin by accepting all this what's offered to him for money.
Yeah, well, we're going to get more insight into his character here as we go through here, but you're right. He's not what God intended the Levites to be, for sure. So, chapter 18 starts off again. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Now, we talked about this. This has a dual meaning. There's no king like King David, but there's also not God as their king. They're living as if nobody's ruling over them. And so they're doing what's right in their own eyes when God was supposed to be their king. So it says the Danites were seeking an inheritance for us. Now, wait a minute. The Danites were given an inheritance by Joshua. But do you remember in Judges chapter 1 that it starts off with Judah? And Judah and Simeon come down here and they begin to take this area, and they're pretty successful. They drive out and defeat most of the people there. And then it goes through and it lists the tribes one by one, and it almost seems to list them in order from Judah did really well, the next tribe did okay, the next tribe mediocre at best, the next tribe didn't really do that great. You know who's the last tribe mentioned? Dan. And what it says about Dan is the Amorites actually drove Dan up into the mountains. In other words, they lost territory in this from the very beginning. So the reason they're seeking more territory is not because God didn't give them enough, it's because they didn't take it. And so they're looking for easier pickings now, is what's going to take place. So they go out to search throughout the territory, and so they leave and they go up from, it says Zoar is one of the places mentioned there, and they go up into Ephraim looking, and they happen by chance to come across Micah's house. And we get an image here, kind of the hospitality that's shown during this time. They stay there, and as they're staying there, they recognize the Levites' southern drawl. And they say, where are you from? What are you doing here? And so he goes through and he explains what he's doing there. And they also say, what do you have here? Now, if you have strangers lodging in your house and they say, so what kind of stuff you got around here? That's usually not a good sign. And so what do you have here? Well, he explains, and he explains how he came to be there and how he's been hired by Micah and how he's become a priest. And so they say, oh, you're a priest. Well, please inquire of God for us how our journey will go, whether we'll be prosperous or not. So they come along, oh, you've got household idols and an ephod? Well, inquire of God. Who would even think of that if they knew? They should be going, whoa, this is not right. This is not the way God set this up. Instead, they're excited. Well, tell us about this. So he inquires of God for them. And here's his answer. Go in peace. May the presence of the Lord be with you on your way. Did God really answer through him? I don't think so. I think he's doing what most false teachers do, and that is give the answer that they wanted to hear and say it came from God. So these 5 men, this was a scouting party from Dan. They left and departed and went up to Laish. Laish is going to be way up here. Now, why can't they find land anywhere else through here? Yeah, it's occupied, either by the Israelites or by the Canaanites still dwelling in the land. So they have to go all the way up here on the fringes of Israel's territory. And when they get up to the fringes of Israel's territory at Laish, that's the name of the place, at least at that time, what they saw was a people that dwelled safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land that might put them to shame for anything. In other words, this is just a peaceful area. By the way, when I got to go over to Israel, this area up here, to me, was probably the most beautiful area of any of the area that I was able to see. Try to get to this. This is right up. This is at Dan, looking north into Lebanon there. But very, very beautiful, lush, green. I felt more at home there than anywhere else because everywhere else it was pretty dry and rocky and brown. And it was green and beautiful there. So I can see when they get up there, they're thinking, yeah, this would be a nice place for us to settle. And unlike the other places we've gone, they're not hostile people here. And so they begin to look at this and think, hey, I think we can do something with this. And so they come back in verse 8 and they talk to their brethren about it. And they say, well, what's your report? And they say, arise and let us go up against them. For we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go, that we may enter and possess the land. But when you go, we will come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into our hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth. In other words, very pleasant. This is where we need to go. Let's get out of this territory that God gave us, and let's go find a territory that's better, that we like better. That's kind of their plan at this point. Colby, you got anything? I motored through that pretty quickly.
I don't.
Anybody else have anything like to mention through verse 10? Well, everybody's pretty excited about that news. So 600 of the men of the Danites left from Zoar and Ashtal. They're mighty men, they're soldiers, and so they go with their armor prepared. And they head up, and it says that they go to Kirjath-Jearim, which Kirjath-Jearim is going to be right here. So they take a little bit different route than I drew, and they're going to go through Kirjath-Jearim and up, and they come to the same place. Now they're taking the same route, and they come up by Micah's house, and they're passing by there. Interesting note here that the writer makes that Kirjath-Jearim had the place that they camped near Kirjath-Jearim had a nickname from then on. What was the nickname? Camp of Dan. Remember when all the Danites came through here and they camped right there? And so, well, where are the sheep at today? Oh, they're over at the Camp of Dan. And so the writer just makes a note of that's how they got that name. So they come to Micah's house, and the 5 men who had gone on the scouting party, as they pass by here, they say to the rest of them, do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molten image. Now, therefore, consider what you should do. They're not just rogue thieves that are going through and they just say, hey, this guy's got a lot of money, let's clean him out. They view this as being more valuable than money. Because what do they view it as? Gods and good luck charms. And if we have this, by the way, we passed through here and we asked this guy to inquire of God for us, and he said we'd be successful in finding a good place, and we did find a good place. Therefore, we need to get these. This is really valuable. What do you think we should do? And they all agree that we need to get them. And so, verse 15, they turned aside and they came into the house of the young Levite, the house of Micah, and the 600 men of war entered the house, and they took, verse 17, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. And what does the priest do at this point? Yeah. What's his? Does he object? Yeah. What do you do? Why do you think he would be concerned about this?
He gets paid by Micah.
Exactly. This is his job leaving right here. And so he's concerned about this. And so, but now here's 600 men armed with their weapons of war. And so he said, what are you doing? And they said to him, be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to one man or to be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel? And how long does it take him to consider that? Not too long. What does it say in verse 20? Yeah, this is a promotion. Wait a minute. Do you realize here's a guy who just took you in and has treated you as a father treats his son. And here are some thieves breaking in and taking some of his most precious things, and you're like, this is going to work out great for me. So, Steve, you were talking about the character of this priest. The character of this priest is not so honorable here on this. You have anything you want to add?
No, not really.
All right. So, he takes his place with the people. In other words, he just joins right in with them. And so they head up and they're heading out. Now, the Danites realize that, we could be in trouble for this. This is a big deal. Micah's not going to be happy about this. So they send their little ones and the most vulnerable ones in front, and then they put their strongest mighty men in the rear flank, anticipating that they may be hunted down for this. And sure enough, when Micah realizes what's going on, he gathers all of his neighbors together and he comes out after them. And when they see Micah coming, they stop and they wait on him. They turn around and they say, what ails you? Why have you gathered such a company? And Micah responds and he says, would you read verse 24 for me?
24?
Yes, sir.
So he said, you have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you have gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, what ails you?
You just robbed me blind of the most precious things that in his estimation, that he had. And the children of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you and you lose your life with the lives of your household. What do they say? I think that's a subtle threat. Now, we're just telling you this for your good, but I'm telling you, if you keep talking about this, we're afraid that someone may get upset and harm you. We don't want that to happen. So you best just be quiet and turn around and go back home. And what does Micah?
Basically, he tells him, you need to be quiet. We're going to keep.
That's exactly right. So what does Micah do? Yeah. So he's just going to have to take the loss, and he goes back without his priest and without his household idols, and he goes back to his house. Okay. So this is just a story that's included in here. It will have ramifications on the Danites in a little bit later on, but we just see this in passing. The real story is the Danites getting up to Laish and how they move their territory. And so they continue on, and you notice in verse 27, they took the things that Micah had made, the priest who belonged to him, and they went to Laish and to a people who were quiet and secure. And they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned their cities with fire. And there was no one to deliver them because they were far from Sidon and they had no ties with anyone. It was in a valley that belonged to Beth Rehob. And so they rebuilt the city there, and they called it after the name of their father, Dan. And so Laish becomes Dan. And look at verse 30. The children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. Does anybody have a footnote on Manasseh there? Moses. So I don't know how strong how compelling of an argument can be made for that, but some manuscripts have that, so they put that in there. And what the writer is trying to do, whether this was a descendant of Moses or just a descendant of some other Levite here, what he's saying is that this priest continued to have influence in the Danites in false religion for a long time. So his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. Now, I have some questions about the captivity of the land, because when you're way up here, what's going to be the first? Who's going to be the first to go into captivity? Yeah, and this territory is going to be conquered by numerous people from the time of the judges till the time of the Assyrians, when the Assyrians come in. So when we think of the captivity of the land, particularly in the northern part up here, we think of the Assyrians. And that may be what's under consideration. But it may be that the one who was writing this was, there would be other captivities that would take place in here that would happen long before the Assyrians. And so perhaps they even have some of that in mind. We don't know for sure. But the point is this, that they picked up this false religion, this idolatrous practice of combining the idolatry of the land and some of the ideas and concepts that God gave in His law. They've combined that, they've taken it with them, and now it becomes a staple of their religion there in the tribe of Dan from this point until at least they're taken into captivity, whatever he has in mind there.
And it started out, it seems, kind of subtle. And as time went on, and as little by little, it grew to where it was more like just a complete rebellion, almost.
Yeah.
And if you just think about it, that's kind of the way apostasy and false teaching works. Just a little bit comes in, and it doesn't take long until it's full grown.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Any other thoughts, comments?
Looking at the map, that sacrificed a lot. I think it took a lot of land for what they got. I mean,
right.
Maybe fertile and, lush, but it's a lot less.
Yeah.
Land.
Well, you're exactly right. But the problem is, this is how much land they were given. They were just forced into the mountains here because of their lack of faith. And so they apparently didn't have to have much faith to go up here and take this. You see the difference? And so you look at it and say, well, why were they successful in one place and not the other? Well, because rather than say, God, we're depending upon you. You gave us this land. We're going to battle, and you be with us. Nah, let's not do that. Well, let's go somewhere else. And so we're not seeing Israel at their best for sure.
And
that's right. That's exactly right.
And another point about that too, if I understood it right, this group of people that we're looking at here in this particular part of the story is only a very small percentage of all of the people of the tribe of Dan.
Yes, I think that's right in this story. So what you have is the war party, but we're not going to, there will be some Danites that remain down here, but from this point on, when we talk about the tribe of Dan, we really are talking about the northern. So the majority of the Danites did migrate up from what I understand. But you're right, in this story, it is a small percentage. But what they did on this occasion affected the rest of the tribe. All right. Anything else about Micah and the Danites? Well, we have come to my least favorite story in all of the Bible. And this rivals the worst news stories that you see today. And when we talk about how bad the world has gotten and how terrible things are and how much things have changed in the last 50 years, all of that's true for our culture. That's not true for mankind. Mankind has had a repeat pattern of being wicked, being very wicked. And so here we see a picture of that in the days of the judges. So in chapter 19, again, it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, that a certain Levite journeyed from the remote mountains of Ephraim, so same location here, and same dealing with a Levite, and he took for himself a concubine from where? Bethlehem in Judah. All right, so let me move off of this map here. Sorry. Just run through and it'll... All right, so he's up in the remote mountains of Ephraim, and down in Bethlehem, he has taken a concubine. Now, verse 2, we're given a little detail here that's just background information for this story, not the main point. But what happens? She's not faithful to him. She plays the harlot. And then she runs away from him and goes back to her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah, and she's there for 4 months. Again, just a snapshot. It's kind of like, you know, if you take a photo of something, and here's a person in the photo, and it's from the 1940s. And so they're standing there, and the person who took the photo is trying to show you, hey, this is Great-Grandma Jones. And but you start looking at the background, and you say, well, look at that old car back there. Man, that thing must be 41 Studebaker or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, you know, an old car there. And look at their house. And look how they got chickens on the front porch. You see those chickens? And you just start noticing the details about that whole time period. That isn't why they took the photo. But you get those, you learn about that time period from the details in the photo. That's kind of what you're seeing in these stories during the days of the judges. So here's a man, he takes a concubine, she's unfaithful to him, runs away, he has to go get her. Okay. Well, have people changed much? You still see that type of thing. Here's what people are doing. They're doing what's right in their own eyes. And so after 4 months, her husband decides, you know what, I'd like to have her back. So he goes down, verse 3 in the New King James says, her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her. And it has a footnote that says to speak to her heart. In other words, try to woo her back. And so when he arrives there in Bethlehem, his father-in-law, her father, is very glad to see him. Probably for several reasons. Because he got his daughter back, and by the way, that was you wanted to marry off your daughters in that time. Because that helped you as a family. That helped you, first of all, you got a dowry from it. Second of all, it was one less mouth that you had to care for in the household. So maybe that's part of what's under consideration here. Maybe he just wants to see the family back together. I don't know. But he's very glad to see the man. And so he invites him to come in to stay, and he detained him. And I'm gonna make this a longer story, a little bit shorter. Every time he plans to leave, what does the father-in-law do? Oh, you can stay a little bit longer. It's a long journey. You can go later. Sit down. Let's have another meal together and just enjoy the time. So he keeps doing that. And it turns into 5 days of this. And so finally, he's like, all right, I'm really leaving today. And he gets up, ready to go. And the guy says, no, stay. Let's at least have lunch together. And so he has lunch. And then he gets up to go. And he goes, no, I'll stay a little bit longer. He said, no, this time I'm going. So all of that's to tell us that it was late in the day when he left. So he's not going to have enough daylight to make it all the way back home on this day. So he starts off on his journey. And verse 10 says, he was not willing to spend the night. He arose and departed, and he came to the place opposite Jebus. What's Jebus? You know Jebus. Jerusalem. That's right. This is before it was taken by David and renamed Jerusalem. So it's still Jebus in this time. And the day was far spent, And now he's traveling with his servant, 2 donkeys, and his concubine that he's just wooed back. And so he goes near Jabez, and the servant says to his master, "Come, please, and let us turn aside into this city of the Jebusites and lodge there." By the way, we know from earlier that Jabez was defeated at one point by the Israelites, but not occupied, and therefore the Jebusites reoccupied it and were in control of it. So this is a Canaanite occupied city, and they're passing by it, and it's late at night, and so let's turn in here. And what does the Levite say? Why not? Why didn't he want to go to Jabez? Yeah, we're not going into those uncircumcised heathen and spend the night with them. No way. Let's go on to an Israelite town. And so they go a little bit further because Gibeah is not far away, and Gibeah is an Israelite town. If we can make it there, then we can spend the night there, and we won't have to spend the night with these Canaanites. And so they leave. Oh, no, that's not what I meant to do. They leave from Bethlehem, and they start traveling, and they pass by Jerusalem, they go all the way to Gibeah, and they get to Gibeah, and it's late, and they come into Gibeah, and verse 15, they sit down in the open square, and no one would take them into their house to spend the night. All right, so what do we already know from past stories about hospitality? Yeah, can you give me an example of somebody that we've already read about this far in the Bible that was? Abraham was. Can you give me another example? Lot was. That's exactly right. And so godly men in times past, when they would see a sojourner, a stranger come into town, they wouldn't let them sleep out on the street. They would take them in and lodge them. But nobody does that. Now, wait a minute. We passed by the Canaanites so we could come to our own people, God's people, and no hospitality shown here by God's people. But just then, verse 16, an old man came in from working in the field at evening. He was a sojourner in Gibeah. He wasn't a native there. And when he saw this traveler in the open square, he said, "Where are you going? And where do you come from?" So the man says, "We're passing from Bethlehem in Judah towards the remote mountains of Ephraim. I'm from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I'm going to the house of the Lord. But there was no one who will take me into his house. Although we have straw and fodder and donkey for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself and for my maidservant, for your maidservant, and for the young man who is with your servant, there's no lack of anything." In other words, we're not asking to feed us and everything. We just need a place to stay. And the old man said, "Peace be with you. However, let all of your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square." And so this guy shows hospitality and invites him into his home and says, "I'll take care of you." So he brought him into his home, gave him fodder to his donkeys, washed their feet, ate and drank. Hospitality. That's what we see here with hospitality. Any thoughts, comments through chapter 21? Verse 21. Okay. Now, as they were enjoying themselves, suddenly, certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house, beat on the door, and spoke to the master of the house. The old man said, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him carnally." Not even that we may meet him, find out who he is. They just state their intentions right away. "Bring him out. We want to rape him." Does this sound familiar? What does this sound like? Yeah. And who were those people that did that? The Sodomites? Yeah, what's that? Yes. That's right. But those were the Sodomites. Who are these people? These are Israelites. These are God's people, acting just like the Sodomites acted. Same thing. This is unbelievable. How could this be happening? And the master of the house went out and said, "No, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage." And then he says something very similar to what Lot said, which I will probably always be puzzled as to Lot giving this response. I've heard explanations, but they don't satisfy me. Yet this man gives a very similar response here. "Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now, humble them, and do with them as you please. But to this man do not do such a vile thing." Now, the parallels of this to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah are intentional, I believe, by God, to show that we've already seen the great wickedness and how God feels about that wickedness, and we can't even believe that would happen. But now, for people who have said that Yahweh is their God and have accepted the covenant and have this law to guide them, acting exactly the same way is absolutely repulsive. Absolutely repulsive. The men would not heed. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. Now, I suspect that he did this on this occasion because he felt like this was the only way he could save himself. In desperation, he pushes his concubine out the door. And what they did to her, it says, they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. Now, the abuse that they subjected her to was so brutal that as the day was dawning, she crawled back to the door of the man's house and died. And so in the morning, when the master arose, he opened the door to go out, and there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house. And in verse 28, he said, "Get up and let us be going." But there was no answer. In other words, I don't know that this is intended to sound like he's just coldly saying, "Get up and go." I think what it's indicating is this is how he discovers she's dead. There's no answer. And so he loads her up on the donkey, and he takes her and goes back to his house. But then in verse 29, when he entered the house, he took a knife, and he laid hold of his concubine, and he dismembered her into 12 pieces, limb by limb. And he sent her throughout all the territory of Israel, a piece to each tribe. What was his purpose of doing this? I want you to imagine that here you are in a prominent city in one of the tribes, any of the tribes of Israel, sitting in the gate, and all of a sudden here comes a messenger with something wrapped in a bundle, and you see that it's got blood on it, and he opens it up, and here's a piece of this young woman there. It would be shocking. What does this mean? What is going on here? What this means is, and then you tell the story. Now, how do you feel right now after just hearing that story?
Someone needs to pay for that.
Somebody needs to pay for that. Do you feel outraged? Do you feel sickened by that? Do you feel... They felt that too. And they were upset about it. And that was exactly what the man was intending to do. He wasn't cutting up his concubine because he enjoyed it. He was cutting it up and sending it out to say, a terrible crime has been committed. Somebody do something about this.
Boy, did Jacob's just, for that sort of
Exactly.
reason,
Yes.
coming amongst his own people, experienced it.
Yes. He may have been safer at Jabez. And, yeah. So, Pretty gruesome here. Thoughts, comments through verse 29? So in verse 29, all who saw it said, "No such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up." In other words, wow, this got their attention. Things are pretty bad. What do you think we need to do? And everybody pretty much agrees that something needs to be done. And so in chapter 20, we're going to have the solution that they take upon themselves to try to deal with this. And this is disturbing, in not so much as in their original intentions, but how this whole story develops and goes down. It's not what you would expect. And what it shows further is it wasn't just the Gibeonites that were like this. All the people were guilty in God's sight. They look at this and they say, "This is horrible. We've got to do something about this." Do you see people today that get so upset because take whatever the latest moral issue is that's shocking to us? I can't believe this. But biblically, you look at their life, it's like the person saying, don't people know that homosexuality is an abomination to God? And they're living in adultery. You see? In other words, they're outraged by this. They don't see the sin in their own life. That's what's going on with Israel right now. They're outraged by this event. But they're just as guilty in so many other areas. And so what God's going to do is He's going to use this event to show them their guilt all the way across and to punish really the whole nation, not just the Gibeonites. All right. Anybody have any comments, discussion?
Did he have servants, send these pieces out?
I suppose so.
It's not going to be
Yeah.
funny.
No.
FedEx, so someone
Right.
had to deliver this.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't say who did it, but I assume that he sent out servants or someone.
Then don't it also mention like different kings and ones, they actually had messengers that would run and tell the news to the king, and probably if you're a rich person, you've probably got people that actually is like FedEx. You go and tell so-and-so
Right.
what happened.
Yeah.
I think stories like this helps us today to be prepared for what we see and hear about.
It does sound similar, doesn't it? In some ways. Certainly does. All right. Well, we got 6 minutes, and we got to where I was hoping to get to because I didn't let Colby talk any. I just bulldozed my way through that. I'm sorry. You got anything you'd like to
I
add?
didn't have a whole lot to say about that.
Not after I took it all.
You did a very good job.
All right, but let's use the time that we have, and we'll go into chapter 20 just a little bit. So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, as well as so from the north to the south, and from the land of Gilead, in other words, across the Jordan River. Everybody comes together because they're outraged about this, and they meet together at Mizpah, and the leaders of all the people of the tribes present themselves to the assembly. Look at the number here in verse 2. 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. This brought people out. They are upset about this. And now, the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone to Mizpah. I don't know that we emphasized this when we were telling this, but whose territory is Gibeah in? Yeah, so the Gibeonites were Benjamites. And so the tribe of Benjamin hears, hey, all the other tribes seem to be pretty upset about what happened there. And so they hear about this. So the children of Israel, when they're all gathered together, say, tell us, how did this wicked deed happen? So the Levite went through and he explained the situation of what happened. And tells why he did this. And So then he ends and he says, look, all of you are children of Israel. Give your advice and counsel here and now. In other words, I did this because of this. Notice in verse 6, he says, I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. Now, what do you want to do about it? And the people arose as one man and said, none of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all of the tribe of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000 to make provisions for the people, that when they come to Gibeah and Benjamin, they may repay all the vileness that they have done to Israel. So we're going to punish them because of this. Now, if you were a Benjamite, or if you were a person in Gibeah, now, not every man in Gibeah was involved in this directly. So what would you do if you heard that this happened in your town? Yeah. And that the whole nation was armed against you now. Wouldn't you not turn them over and say, here are the guilty folks. These are the men that were involved in this. What? I know. So think about what's going on in their mind. Here's this atrocity that's been committed, and they're not going to turn them over to them.
Well, it just shows you how sinful that they are by thinking after worldly, and they going, well, we do stuff wrong every day, and God don't destroy us. Why should we destroy them?
I think that may be the thing.
Doing what's right in their own eyes.
I think that's probably right. So the tribes of Israel don't just come in and attack. They go to the tribe of Benjamin and say, what is this wickedness that has occurred among you? Now therefore deliver up the men, the perverted men who are at Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. Instead, the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah. In other words, we're going to protect the Gibeonites to go to battle against the children of Israel. So now we're about to have a civil war take place in the nation of Israel. And one tribe against 11.
I don't know if this is it, ask God. I don't know if they ask God, but still, this would be what, by their law, what God would.
Yeah. That's right. These people deserve death by the law. And so what's taking place here would not be out of step with God. That's what's going to make this story so difficult, because at this point, who are the good guys in your mind?
Nobody.
You're right. But as we're reading this, to me, the good guys are, well, here are the children of Israel who are going to take care of this. They're not going to let this stand. But what Sherry said is right. They're not the good guys. And we're about to find that out. And so when you're just reading through this is terrible on your emotions, because you're going through and you're seeing this and you're thinking, all right, well, now the bad guys are about to get what they really deserve, and the good guys are going to win. And that's not what happens. I'll have to leave it right there. We'll pick up there next time as we continue this most sad story. Thank you for your good attention. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.